Puppy returned to shelter 7 times. Then staff uncovers a shocking truth. The sun rose over the quiet town of Willow Creek, casting a golden hue on the modest little animal shelter that had become a second home to countless stray and abandoned animals. Among the wagging tails and hopeful eyes of the shelter's residents, there was one pup whose story had perplexed and saddened the staff more than any other. His name was Benny. Benny was a small, golden-furred Labrador mix with deep brown eyes that seemed to hold the weight of a lifetime. He had first arrived at the Willow Creek shelter as a tiny, malnourished puppy, found abandoned on the side of a highway. The shelter staff nursed him back to health, showering him with love, and soon Benny became one of the most popular dogs for adoption. Everyone adored him. He was affectionate, playful, and well-mannered. Yet, despite his undeniable charm, Benny had been returned 7 times. 7 different families had taken him home, promising him forever, only to bring him back within days or weeks. Each time the reasons varied: he's too needy, he won't stop whining at night, he stares too much, he acts like he's waiting for something. Some even claimed there was an eerie presence about him, something unsettling they couldn't explain. The shelter staff was heartbroken. How could such a wonderful dog be deemed unlovable? Benny didn't misbehave, nor did he have any apparent behavioral issues. Every time he returned, he sat quietly in his kennel, his soulful eyes watching the door as if expecting someone to walk through at any moment. It was as if he were waiting for something, or someone. #### The mystery deepens. Determined to uncover the mystery behind Benny's repeated returns, one of the shelter's longest-serving employees, Margaret, decided to keep him overnight at her own home. She wanted to observe his behavior in a home setting and perhaps, finally, understand why this beautiful, gentle pup couldn't seem to find a family. That evening, Benny lay curled up at the foot of Margaret's couch as she read a book. He seemed calm, his head resting on his paws, but his ears twitched at the slightest sound. It wasn't until the middle of the night that something truly strange happened. Margaret awoke to a faint whining. She turned on the light to find Benny sitting near the front door, staring at it intently, his tail wagging slightly as if he expected someone to come through. She approached him, kneeling beside him, and whispered softly, "Benny, what is it?" The dog let out a quiet, hopeful whimper, his eyes filled with something Margaret couldn't quite place. Was it sadness? Anticipation? Longing? Then something clicked in Margaret's mind. Every person who had returned Benny had mentioned his behavior around doors and windows, his incessant staring, his whines in the dead of night. What if Benny wasn't just acting out? What if he was waiting for someone he had lost? #### A search for the truth. Determined, Margaret delved into Benny's past. She contacted the shelter's previous manager, scoured adoption records, and even searched old social media posts. After several hours of digging, she uncovered something shocking. Benny had originally belonged to a man named Daniel who had adopted him as a puppy. The two had been inseparable, Benny always by Daniel's side. But 2 years ago, Daniel had gone missing after a hiking trip in the nearby mountains. His disappearance had remained unsolved, and Benny had been found wandering alone, eventually making his way to the shelter. Margaret's heart ached as she realized the truth: Benny wasn't unwanted. He was waiting for his true owner, the man he had loved, to return. Fueled by newfound determination, Margaret reached out to local authorities, hoping for any updates on Daniel's case. To her astonishment, a recent report had surfaced. A hiker had been found in the mountains, disoriented and suffering from memory loss. He had been identified as Daniel, missing for nearly 2 years. #### The emotional reunion. Margaret wasted no time. She drove to the hospital where Daniel was recovering, bringing Benny along. As they entered the sterile white room, Benny suddenly perked up. His tail began to wag frantically, his entire body trembling with excitement. Daniel, who had been staring out the window with a vacant look, turned at the sound of Benny's eager whimpers. His eyes widened in recognition. "Benny?" The dog let out an excited bark and launched himself into Daniel's arms, licking his face with desperate affection. Tears streamed down Daniel's cheeks as he clung to the furry companion he thought he had lost forever. The hospital staff watched in awe as Daniel, whose memory had been patchy and unreliable, began recalling everything. Benny had been the missing piece of his life, the key to unlocking the past he had forgotten. From that moment on, Daniel's recovery accelerated. He regained more memories, his strength returning alongside his best friend. The bond between man and dog, tested by time and fate, had withstood even the cruelest separation. Benny was finally home. ###Benny's new life. Now that Benny had been reunited with Daniel, life changed drastically for both of them. No longer a lonely pup in a shelter, Benny basked in Daniel's love and companionship. They moved back to their old home, a cozy little house near the edge of town, where they had spent countless days hiking, playing, and enjoying the outdoors. However, something had changed in Daniel. He no longer took life for granted. His experience of being lost in the wilderness had given him a new appreciation for every moment, and he wanted to give back. Inspired by Benny's loyalty and love, Daniel decided to volunteer at the very shelter that had cared for his beloved dog. Margaret was overjoyed to see them together again, and with Daniel's help, the shelter thrived. He worked with the staff to help dogs with separation anxiety, train them to be better companions, and even helped raise awareness about lost pets in the community. The moral of the story. True love and loyalty never fade, no matter the time or distance. Benny's unwavering devotion to his owner proves that some bonds are unbreakable, and sometimes, all we need to heal is the presence of those who love us unconditionally. This expanded version includes deeper emotions and additional details to enrich the story. Let me know if you'd like further expansions or refinements.